The government has rejected the introduction of a Hillsborough Law following the publication of its full response to the 2017 report of the Hillsborough disaster. It has laid out a Hillsborough Charter instead and offered an apology for the delay. The introduction of a Hillsborough Law was central to the campaign by families of the 97 people who died as a result of the 1989 disaster to prevent future police cover-ups. Louise Brooks, whose brother was killed, called it, quote, an insult. The report was issued following decades of inquiries and legal cases into the deaths of the 97 Liverpool fans during the 1989 FA Cup semi-final match in Hillsborough Stadium. During that time, the families of the victims suffered from huge legal fees and media misrepresentation in their search for justice. In 2016, the Hillsborough inquest concluded those who died in the 1989 disaster were unlawfully killed.
Madam Deputy Speaker, the Hillsborough families have suffered multiple injustices. The loss of 97 lives, the blaming of the fans and the unforgivable institutional defensiveness by public bodies. I'm profoundly sorry for what they have been through. Today, the government has published its response to Bishop James Jones's report to ensure the pain and the suffering of the Hillsborough families is not repeated. I'm immensely grateful they have shared their experiences.
The former Bishop of Liverpool, the Right Reverend James Jones, who published the 2017 report, said the government's statement fell short of the families' hopes. However, he welcomed their actions and believed significant changes had been introduced.
I recognise that the experiences of the families have significantly changed and shaped the government's proposal for an independent public advocate. It is clear to me that the families are winning the argument for change in both the law and culture. The purpose of my report was to ensure that the pain and suffering of the Hillsborough families is never repeated. I say to the government, and humbly to the families, that this will be the test of these measures. The government has made significant changes, and I will continue to press for further action.
The government has fully adopted Bishop Jones's recommendation for a sort of a code of conduct, I think is probably how you could best describe it, for public bodies to sign. The government says it will be something that will be signed on behalf of the government by the Deputy Prime Minister. It will ensure that government departments and public bodies act with openness, transparency and candour when it is dealing with the aftermath of a public tragedy. What families and campaigners, though, hoped to see in this was legal teeth behind these codes of conduct. They wanted to see a Hillsborough Law. That would mean there would be a duty of candour that would be legally required for all public bodies to have to sign. The government stopped short of that, saying there was a ministerial code and that was enough for public servants. But they did say that they would introduce a duty of candour for policing to ensure that same legal framework of candour, openness, transparency was something that would have to be adopted by police forces in England and Wales. There was also a look at how there would be easier access to free legal help for families as they were taking part in huge public inquests. Again, it stopped short of what campaigners were calling for, which was easy access to free legal help. In this document, they say the government says it will only look at consulting on that for now. But also within this is the confirmation of what we heard in Parliament just a few weeks ago, that the government will look at appointing an independent public advocate. This is someone who will work on behalf of families as they head into what can be extremely lengthy and extremely expensive and complicated inquests or public inquests, where families up until this point who have spoken to the government, not just from Hillsborough, but from Grenfell Towers, tragedies like the Manchester Arena bombing, where they said it felt like we were taking on Goliath and we were David in that situation. We didn't have the same legal resources, we didn't have the same access to funding, and for many of these families it was an extremely distressing and confusing experience. The government hope that the independent public advocate will go some way to try and bridge that gap.
Steve Rotherham, Mayor of the Liverpool City region, has already delivered his response. He said, for 6 years, Bishop James's report has been languishing on the desk of consecutive Home Secretaries without the dignity of a response. I know at times that weight has felt intolerable. The legal avenues to ensure those responsible for the Hillsborough disaster were held to account have been exhausted without justice being served. The law has failed the Hillsborough families and countless other groups affected by tragedy. Ensuring that no grieving family is forced to suffer the same indignity would be a fitting legacy for their decades of tireless effort.